The zipper sweater by Petiteknit is a popular pattern for a good reason. It's the perfect sweatshirt style sweater that can be thrown on and worn casually with everything. And a lot of people have knit this pattern, but I imagine that there are quite a few people out there who haven't knit it because they're intimidated by the zipper insertion. So today I'm going to take you through the steps of how to install the zipper. I have gone ahead and knit the zipper sweater light for myself, and this is the size small. In the pattern, she suggests a 35 centimeter zipper, which is quite a bit longer than the opening for the zipper hole. The opening for the zipper is smaller than the length of the zipper that is recommended, and I found that this still was the best zipper to use in terms of color matching for myself. If you can find a zipper that exactly matches your opening, that's ideal, but most of the time you won't. So today I thought I would show you how to modify the zipper to make it fit nicely into your sweater. Petiteknit does offer a tutorial on her website on how to shorten a metal zipper. In my opinion, the way that she shortens it is not my preferred method. She goes ahead and cuts off the bottom part of the zipper. Personally, I like to maintain this zipper stopper at the end of the zipper and would rather adjust the length of the zipper by removing some of the length from the top. So that's what I'm going to do today, and I'll show you just how to do that. The first part of the zipper insertion process is actually going to be sewing down the facing of the zipper. So we're going to set aside the actual zipper itself for a minute and get ready to sew down this facing that we have knit onto the inside part of the neckband so that we create a nice little channel for the zipper to sit in. We'll use a little bit of leftover mohair from the project, or if you didn't use mohair or don't have any leftover, you can just use regular sewing thread that matches as closely as possible to your project. I've turned the sweater inside out, and so you can see that this is the facing and this is the wrong side of the fabric. We have the facing attached here up at the collar. All of the instructions for how to do the facing are of course included in the pattern, but the idea is that we will sew down the right hand side of the facing to the sweater, and we'll sew it down along a seam that's the width of the facing away from the edge. So we'll sew down this right hand side to the sweater right here, and what we'll be left with is a little opening here for the zipper to sit into a little channel there. We're going to start at this, when the sweater is inside out, it will be the right hand side of the sweater, and we're going to line up this edge as best as we possibly can, looking at the stitches here and seeing that they kind of line up there, and we'll press that flat with our fingers so that that edge is flush, and we'll come and look over here. This is the base of the facing, this is the ribbing that's attached to the collar. And what we want to look for is when we spread out the facing, we want to look for the column of stitches that will line up best with this edge of stitches so that we can follow that column of purl bumps all the way down the sweater. So making sure that it's lined up on the edge here, we'll see if we're going to be following a bump that makes a U shape or a little mountain. So I think we're going to follow the little mountain shaped bumps all the way down. So I'm going to go into this first little mountain here, and then I'm going to go into the first stitch on the facing. I'm going to pull that mohair thread through until I get to a good amount of a tail that I can sew in later on, and I'll just hold that back with my thumb. So then I'm going to look for the next bump that's facing up like a little mountain. and that's why I need to carefully hold this away from my work so it doesn't all get tangled. And I'll stitch that facing down. So then just following this row, you see this is the row of little mountain bumps, purl bumps that I'm going to be following all the way down to attach my facing so that it attaches in an even line. So I've just gone through that little purl bump there, and I'm going to go in to the stitch on the facing next. So again, look for that same line of purl bumps and go in there. And then back into a stitch on the facing. And I'll continue sewing in this manner all the way down the facing, or all the way down the front of the neck opening until the facing is fully attached to the sweater. And go into a little purl bump here. At this point, I'm just going to stop for a minute, make sure this is still looking aligned on the outside. It is. I'm still in the same column of purl bumps that I'm going to follow the entire way. I'm going to go into that next stitch on the facing, and then the purl bump. Okay, so I'm going to continue that all the way down until I get down here at the bottom of the V, we'll call it, and then I'll just rejoin you there. Now that I've sewn down that single row or column of purl stitches, I'm come to the bottom of the facing, and I'm going to press this facing flat so that the V-neck of the sweater aligns with the V of the facing, and that will help me get the position right on the sweater where I will sew the facing to the actual sweater itself. And I'm going to pick one row that's like one closer to myself. Then maybe this could be the row that I would sew down, but I'm going to pick one that's directly underneath so that this isn't tugging at all on the facing, that the facing doesn't tug at all on the sweater, because I don't want there to be a line from the front of the sweater if at all possible. So I'm going to go in and just stitch along the edge. And even though, of course, we want to make this as neat as possible, it's important to remember that this is just on the inside of the sweater. But doing a neat job and a careful job on the inside of this sweater will also help the appearance of the outside look as neat as possible. So I'm just going in to a little purl stitch on the sweater, and then into one of these cast off V's sort of from the facing across the length of the facing. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I did on the other side, which will be to sew up the column of purl stitches to sew down the other side of the facing. But first, I'm just going to have a look from the front side of the sweater and make sure that I'm happy with how it looks there. And I am very happy with that. I don't see a line, so I'm going to proceed to sewing up the facing edge onto the sweater of the other side. So we still have the sweater inside out at this time, and the facing is completely sewn down to the inside of the sweater, and you can see here that we have a nice little opening all along the facing edge where we will now be able to insert our zipper. What's going to be important now is to measure the length of the facing opening and compare that with the length of the zipper that we have, and then decide how much we're going to need to shorten the zipper by to get it to fit in that facing. So you'll just want to check again that it looks like the facing is lying flat and how you want it to be. You can see I did end up getting a little bit of a line here, but I think that all things considered, it looks pretty good. We need to decide how long the zipper is going to be so that we can adjust the length. What we're going to do first is tuck it into that little pocket that we created here. And I'm going to unzip the zipper a little bit so that I can tuck the zipper in to the facing and then make a note or a mark where the zipper reaches the top of the collar. And I'll just do that with a little sewing pin. You could use a marker or whatever you have on hand. We don't want the zipper to be forced into this space. Like, we don't want to try to make a longer amount of the zipper than there is of the sweater. Like, they should just be exactly the same length so that you still have a nice smooth edge where the zipper is attached, that it doesn't become wobbly at all. So I'm going to come up here and see that I think if I imagine that the zipper is there, the top of the zipper will be here. And you just got to do this a little bit carefully because the knitted fabric is obviously quite stretchy compared to the stiffness of the zipper. So that's why you just got to mark it. Don't be like trying to pull out the sweater to line up the zipper. Just let it lie flat and naturally, and then mark where the top of the zipper is. This is another reason why I like to have my sweater blocked before I do the zipper insertion, in case this length is going to grow at all in blocking. I'd rather have that happen before I'm inserting the zipper than afterwards, because that might also distort the fabric around the zipper. So now that I have the position of the top marked here, oops, I accidentally attached it to the fabric. So I have that marked. I'll go ahead and zip up the zipper to that point. And what I'm going to do now is actually to remove the zipper teeth from here. And I only have to remove maybe 5 or 6 zipper teeth above my mark. But why I'll do that because I will want this to be the end of the zipper teeth. And once the teeth are removed, it will be easier to fold back the edge of the zipper tape and sew that down so that it fits nicely into the top of the collar. So the easiest way to remove zipper teeth is with pliers. And now that I actually marked this with a pin, I'm going to go ahead and mark it with a pen because that will be easier for removing the zipper teeth. So I'll just make a little mark here with a pen, take out that pin, and indicate on both sides of the zipper where the top of the zipper is going to be. And I'm going to remove the zipper teeth above that line. And sometimes this, requires a little bit of force. I'll probably pick this tooth to start with. This is a little bit tricky to do on camera. So let me readjust my position here. Okay, that's the first zipper tooth removed. And I'll grab onto the next one. I remember now that I do usually just use one set of pliers, and I grab it with my hand and pull it off. So I'm just gonna remove maybe 5 teeth, and then I'll come back to you, okay? And now that I have those teeth removed, I want to be really careful not to let the zipper head come off the edge of the teeth, but I do want to just double check that I think I've picked the correct tooth to start with. And I think I have. They look like they're pretty aligned, even if maybe this side is a little bit higher. like one side has to be a little bit higher because they interlock like this. So that looks good, and what I'll do now is I'll cut off the zipper tape right at this edge of the last tooth. And I also like this method because you're not having to cut through any teeth, which you do have to do if you come to try to cut off the bottom zipper, which is what is described in the pattern. And that can really ruin your scissors, so I prefer to remove the teeth and then cut next to the teeth instead of trying to cut through the teeth or cut through the tape next to the teeth. So there is that zipper bit. If you want to, you could go ahead with a lighter or a flame and seal off the edge of this zipper tape. So now that edge is all sealed, it's super easy and quick. And what I'll do now is pick my matching thread for the zipper, and we'll sew down these two little edges so that we have a nice clean zipper top to insert into the sweater. Now, rather than the tapestry needle, I'm going to be using a sewing needle and thread that matches as closely as possible to either your zipper or your sweater. This is the best that I have for my project, so it doesn't need to match perfectly, and this is going to work really well. So you want to just pull off a length of thread and get that knotted and put onto your needle. For this first part, I don't actually need a very long piece of thread because all I'm going to do is fold down the top edge of the zipper. I'll move it to the wrong side so that you can see what it looks like. This is the wrong side of the zipper. And I just want to have that edge tucked down like that so that it's out of the way of the zipper teeth, but also creates a nice flat edge on the top. And I'll just do a couple of stitches here. You can do it by hand easily, or if you want to, you could also do it on your sewing machine, but unless you sew a lot like me, maybe you don't have your sewing machine out all the time, then this is perfectly fine to just do a couple of hand stitches. And we already have our hand stitch needle out to do the zipper insertion anyway, so here we go. Doesn't have to be neat at all, just to sew this edge down. And you'll just repeat that for the other side. We'll put our sewing thread aside for just a moment while we position our zipper and pin it in place for the insertion. So we'll start up here at the top, and we'll want to make the flat edge of the zipper top flush with the top edge of the collar so that it just fits nicely in there, and there's like a little, zipper sandwich. So the collar is on either side of the zipper and it's just sandwiched in there nicely. And we'll take some sewing pins and pin down the length of the edge of the opening where we want the zipper to be inserted. We're going to be stitching along this first column here of purl bumps. So we want one column of knit stitches to be on the left side of our stitch line, and we'll pin in that way too so that we use our pins as a guide to where we're going to sew. So pin that like that, and I'm only going through one layer right now. I just had that kind of sandwich position so that I'm making sure that I was at the top of the collar, but I'm only going to pin through the outer sweater layer and the zipper right now, not the facing. Okay, and we'll just follow this all the way down to the bottom of the zipper, which will be here in our little pocket that we made earlier. And we'll do one side at a time, obviously, but we'll do this first side, and then we're going to want to do a little check that the zipper lines up. So one of the points that we'll check that at is, of course, the top of the zipper, that those line up, but also at this collar line here. You want to make sure that the collar line lines up. So you don't want to have that get skewed by the zipper if your zipper isn't exactly lined up correctly. So you'll want the edge of your knitted sweater to be as close to the zipper teeth as possible, but you don't want to make them too close, because then your zipper will have a hard time to run up and down and close properly. You also don't want to stretch out your fabric of your sweater as you're doing this, because that can result in a wonky zipper, or also a zipper that's too short for your opening that we measured earlier. So we just want to try to do it as gently and carefully as we can. I feel like I may have stretched a little bit, so I might go back and redo this part a little bit. And one idea could also be to start a little from the bottom and kind of meet up with the other edge. So I think I'll do that. Don't be afraid to undo and start again, because you want your zipper insertion to look the best that it can. And you've already spent all of this time knitting your sweater, so making these final details as neat as possible will really give you a polished, finished garment. And I think you're worth it to spend this time on this last little detail part to give yourself a really nice finish, even if it means having to go back and repin a little bit, like I'm doing here. When you repin a little bit, especially like starting a little from the top and then going to the bottom, it helps distribute any of the extra sort of fabric that you might have had, and I think that will help you get a nice even edge. So there we have the first edge sewn, or pinned on rather, and now I'm going to go to the inside of this sweater and pin on the facing, because what we'll end up doing is actually sewing through both the outer part of the sweater, through the zipper, and then onto the facing side. So you'll be sewing through that whole kind of sandwich part. But it's good to pin them separately so that you get that position correct, and you can redo it if you need to. So same when you're pinning in the back facing part, you want to make sure that you are catching the fabric from the front and the back side, and that the position of the zipper is similarly close to the edge of your knitting on the front and the back. So hopefully that makes sense. So I like to go through and kind of hold the sweater in position and hold the facing in position as well as I take out the pin from the front side, and then repin with both of them, both of the layers. Make sure that I catch that back layer and take it through to the front. I think that I did my pins a little bit close together, which is making this a little bit more challenging than it needs to be. And I'll continue that way all the way down the sweater. I'll pin the other side as well, and then we'll come back and stitch that down. I've gone ahead and pinned through both layers of the fabric with the zipper sandwiched in between now, down both sides of the opening of the sweater. So I've also carefully zipped the sweater back up so that I can confirm that this collar edge here is lining up nicely on either side of the zipper. And if it's not, then you can go back and adjust the position of your pins and fiddle with the fabric a little bit. But this looks really good, so I'm going to go ahead and start at the top. We'll open up the zipper again carefully. And I'm going to tie a knot in the end of my thread so that the thread is doubled. And I have my sewing needle on the thread. And the first stitch I'm going to do will be a short stitch to secure the thread to the project. So I'll take out my first pin, put my pin cushion back over here, take out the first pin, and I will go through the back side of the sweater with my needle right through to the front, and I want it to come just on the inside, or the outside, I guess, edge of the edge stitch here, both on the back side and on the front side. And I want to make sure that it's still in a good position from the edge of the zipper. And I will pull that not all the way through like I just did. I'll leave a little tail here, and I'll go next to the thread that just came out, very close by to that one, and come back out the reverse side. And now I'll make sure I put my needle through this loop here on the back, like that, so that I can secure the thread really well. Now I will be able to sew down the length of the zipper, sandwiching the zipper between the facing and the outer fabric, and sewing right like this along the edge of, or just inside the edge of the edge stitch. So you can skip down like a half centimeter or so when you're doing these stitches. It doesn't have to be super close together, but just with the first one you want to make sure that you have secured the edge of the thread really well. So now you can see the finished zipper insertion, and I've sewn the layers all together down one side of the zipper, across the bottom here, and then up the other side. These points are aligning really nicely, as is the top of the sweater. And here we have the zipper stopper at the bottom that I was hoping to preserve. And I just feel, I don't know, I feel better about shortening the zipper from the top. This is what it looks like. At the top, you have your little piece that's tucked in behind there, but this is all sewn down, so it's not like you see that part or anything. And you get a really clean finish on the front of the sweater as well because of the nice facing. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found this tutorial on how to insert the zipper for the zipper sweater to be useful. If you did, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to my channel if you'd like to see more content like this.